Hey there, my name's Chef Alex. I'm from Sundance Resort, and I am the culinary director and executive chef here. I am here to talk about turkeys and Thanksgiving. We all know that this is our favorite part of the holidays, and we want to show you what we do at the resort to make our turkeys so special. And we know that this is a topic that many people really want to make sure they get right. They have to impress their family and friends coming over, and they want to do the best job they can. So we're going to give you a few of our tips and the things that we do to make sure that your turkey turns out great. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you select the right turkey. There's a few different parameters for what that's going to look like. Depending on how big your party size is that's coming to join you, depends on how big the turkey's going to be and whether you're looking for something that's maybe free range versus frozen. Those are both great options for what you want to choose. It's just a little bit different how you're going to treat them in your preparations for the dinner. So if you have a party size roughly, say 8 to 10 people, you're going to look for a bird that's roughly 10 to 12 pounds. If you're having a party size that's a little bigger, say 14 to 16 people, you want a little bit larger turkey, probably somewhere in the range of 14 to 16 pounds. The turkey that we've selected here, there's a few things you need to pay attention to. First, these turkeys will always come with some extra goodies inside of them. You usually have a turkey neck, which you can remove there, and you'll also have some of the giblets. Now, don't just go ahead and toss these. These are things that you actually can use to make your gravy. So cut them up, make them smaller, and you can actually sear them in a big giant pot first and use them as a base for your turkey gravy. If you don't have that, you can also use turkey base as well, but having fresh bones and some of those innards from the turkey help to add the flavor and pack the flavor in for you. The next thing you want to look at is to prep the turkey out to be placed in the brine. These turkeys often will come with their back legs, which will be tied up. A lot of times you'll notice here that there's a little bit of extra skin flap that you can tuck those legs into. The idea here is to kind of bring this turkey in and keep it all in one nice little pile that as it sits in that brine, it can help to absorb that flavor in. So again, I'll also try to tuck the wings in a little bit just to make sure that everything looks good and it is ready to go in the brine. The last thing you want to pay attention to is depending on what type of turkey you choose. So if you're going to brine your turkey, you want to make sure that you don't buy one that already has some sort of a salt mixture injected into it. Things like butterball turkeys, for example, they come with a injection that's been placed into the meat, which adds some of that salt and herb flavor to it. If you're planning on brining your turkey, don't do this. This obviously will give you too much salt and will make the turkey not what you're looking for. So you want to find one that hasn't been injected with any kind of extra flavor. And you want to also look at whether you're doing frozen or, as I mentioned, a fresh product. If it is frozen, totally is fine. You just want to make sure you give yourself 3 or 4 days for that turkey to defrost in your fridge. You'd be surprised how long turkeys can actually stay frozen. And if you don't give yourself enough time and they're still frozen when you go into the brine, it can definitely affect the way that bird takes on some of that extra flavor. So you want to make sure you give yourself plenty of time to let that turkey defrost. In your fridge is the best possible way to do that. Usually, like I mentioned, 3 to 4 days should take care of it for you. All right, so now we're on to the next step of this endeavor, and that is to actually put the turkey in the brine. Now, you want to get yourself some kind of a vessel that can hold that turkey. We just have in the kitchen, we use these nice plastic Cambro buckets. You can find yourself any kind of a big bucket that you could put the turkey into and have enough space so that the liquid can cover the turkey entirely. Really, there's no wrong answer here. It's just something that you can use in your kitchen that also fits in your refrigerator, because that's going to be the key part, is making sure that it stays cold during this process. So I'm going to go ahead and place the turkey into this bucket. Again, I'm going to make sure that everything's tucked in nice and neat. And then this is where I'm going to add the brine. Our brines typically are always going to consist of salt and sugar. And you can also use all sorts of different flavors in there as well. We like to use onions and garlic. We like to use lemon peel, rosemary, and thyme. But really, you can add anything you'd like to. There's a variety of spices out there. There's even a variety of blends of seasonings out there that you can use in this type of a brine. The goal of this is just to ensure that you have salt, a little bit of sugar, and some kind of seasoning. You're using that in a water or a stock mixture, which usually you'll bring up to a simmer or a boil to let those granules dissolve. And then the key part is that you're going to make sure that your brine is cooled before you place it on the turkey. If you don't, that obviously can have some cooking effect, and we don't want to do that. So the best way to do this is make your brine and then allow it at least maybe a day or so to cool down in your fridge. You can place it in the fridge overnight if you have to, and then use it the following day, which is totally fine as well. The best thing we can do here is just make sure that we are following a recipe, which we have a recipe listed for you, and it's in the description on this video. It will give you all of the steps and all of the ingredients with all the quantities you want to use. And that's a generic recipe that we use here at the resort when we brine poultry. So it can be a turkey, chicken, duck, anything like that. It is a really good kind of save all for a recipe that you want to use. So we're going to go ahead and just pour this into our bucket. Try not to spill as much as we can. Now you may notice as I'm pouring this in there are some little bit of herbs and maybe some chunks of onion and garlic in there. That's totally okay. If you like to strain those things out of your brine, you can as well. But you don't have to. You can leave them in there and it just adds to the flavor as it sits in here. The other key part to this is to make sure that the bird is actually submerged in the water. So the other thing you're gonna wanna make sure you do is that you have the turkey fully submerged. The best way that I found to do this is to have a couple of plates, maybe something that can be submerged in water that's not gonna be ruined, and you can place them right on top of that bird and let it sit in there. Again, you wanna fully submerge it. If you have any part of the turkey or chicken or whatever you're brining sticking out of that liquid, then obviously that's not gonna take in as much flavor. So having it fully submerged in the water is your goal here. Now, the length of time for brining is gonna be your other key aspect here. The goal for us is to give it enough time that it is able to take on that extra flavor, but we don't want to let it go too far. If we let it go too far, it can make the turkey overly salty when you go to cook it, and that's not what we're looking for. So a general rule of thumb is if you have a larger bird, say a 16 to 20 pound bird, you're generally going to want to go 18 to 24 hours. If you have something that's a little bit smaller, maybe a 10 to 12 pound bird, you're going to want to look maybe 12 to 14 hours. Typically for a large bird like this, we usually will place it in the brine and let it sit in the fridge overnight. So it gets about 18 hours before you want to take it out of that brine. You do want to remove that at some point, as I mentioned, to make sure that you don't have too much salt flavor. All right, so now your turkey has set in the fridge overnight for the length of time that you need it to, and you're ready to take it out and do a little bit of preparation before we're going to cook it. So the best thing to do here is to remove this turkey out of the brine and place it on some sort of a resting rack. This can be a sheet pan cooking sheet that you have for your oven, and there's usually some kind of a wire rack system. You want to have something that's suspending that bird off of the pan itself. The goal here is that we want to ensure that there's enough air circulating so that when the turkey has the chance to dry the skin out, it's gonna be able to dry all of the skin, not just the top layer. So as you can see, I'm gonna pull this out of the brine, letting it drip for a few minutes. And I'm gonna go ahead and just place that right on our rack here. Now, as I mentioned, we want to have this turkey skin be a little bit dry. Generally speaking, when you go into the oven, you're going to get a better reaction and a darker skin color cook when you have a little bit of a drier turkey. So the best thing to do is take a couple of napkins. You can actually just pad the right top of that turkey just to remove some of that excess moisture. If you find that maybe your turkey set in the brine a little bit too long, you also can run this under clear, fresh water. It'll help to kind of wash out some of that extra salt liquid, but having a little bit in there is not the end of the world, and it obviously can help just keep the meat tender and juicy as you're looking in that cooking process. The last thing I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna make sure that all of my legs are tucked in correctly, and I'm also gonna try and turn my wings in just a little bit. A lot of times it's kind of overlooked that when you're cooking a turkey, if you don't turn those wing ends in towards the inside of the turkey, they can actually burn long before the turkey's ever done. So it's a good practice to kind of bend those in and push them inwards. If you have to, you also can use maybe a piece of twine or something to tie that. Generally, if you just tuck them in there, they're usually sitting pretty well and it's not too much of a problem. So now that this is out of the brine and it's patted dry, we're ready to go in the oven and we're ready to cook. You also could let this sit in the fridge overnight if you wanted to. If you wanted to cook the following day, that would be totally fine as well. All right, so now we're ready to go in the oven. But before we do that, there's a couple things to talk about. A lot of times people like to use stuffing with their turkey, and that's totally a possibility. If you want to do that at this point, you would definitely make your stuffing and put that in the turkey. It does change your cooking a little bit. It's going to be 15 minutes per pound if you have stuffing, and it'll be 13 minutes per pound if you don't have stuffing. It's totally up to you what you'd like to do. It's really just a preference at that point. It doesn't necessarily change too much. It can add a little bit of extra flavor, but mostly it's just giving the stuffing itself a little bit of turkey flavor rather than injecting anything into the turkey. The last thing I'll talk about here is there's also an opportunity to use some butter to help give some extra flavor. A lot of times people like to take some butter and actually rub that under the skin of the turkey. And you can find that you can actually keep some of that butter pad under the skin and move that around. Now the process here is just that's going to obviously melt and it's going to add some extra flavor to this. You can also do this process partway through your cooking. If you have maybe an hour left of the cooking process, you can take your turkey out briefly, rub the whole thing down with some butter or maybe some olive oil, whatever's your preference, and that'll continue to give some flavor and will also actually help the coloring of the turkey skin itself too. All right, so now we're ready to go in the oven. And for our oven temperature, we're looking for 325 degrees. If you have a thermometer, that's definitely helpful during the cooking process. It's not necessarily required. As I mentioned, you just pay attention to the poundage and the time that you're going to cook and then keep eyes on it. If you do have a thermometer, you can actually use that in the turkey breast, which will help give you a better idea of what the temperature is. If you're looking to use a thermometer, you want to do 165 degrees to get the turkey fully cooked. So I'm going to go ahead and place the turkey in. All right, now as the turkey's in here, you can see that I also put a catch pan. This is going to catch any extra juices or flavors that are falling into the pan, which can be used for your gravy later on, so make sure you don't lose any of those. I'm also going to take the thermometer that I have and I want to put this in the turkey breast. I'm going to make sure that as I put that in there, it's not touching any of the bones. That can skew the temperatures and the time, so you want to make sure that you place that as deep as you can without being anywhere near the bones itself. Then all we have to do is close the door and wait. All right, so the turkey's out of the oven now, and as bad as we want to just dive right into it, we need to just take a break for 1 second. A few things we're looking for. Obviously, we want to just double check the color. We definitely want to see some nice browning on the outside, and you'll notice too that it has a nice crust texture to it, which is great. A lot of people like to, at this point, maybe rub some butter or something across the top. You can, although I don't like to do that. I like to keep that crust as crispy as I can. Usually introducing some kind of a butter or an oil to it will soften that up. Again, that's preference. If you'd like to do that, you're welcome to. The last thing I'm gonna do is I need to let this rest. Before we carve into it, I wanna allow a little bit of time for the juices that are moving around to kind of reabsorb and redistribute. So the best thing to do in this case is actually to take a piece of tin foil. We're just gonna kind of make a soft little tent over the bird. I'm not necessarily covering it fully entirely. I wanna have a little bit of ventilation, but my goal here is to actually trap in some of that heat while it's resting. The goal here is to let this rest for about 20 to 30 minutes. That's going to give it enough time for those juices to redistribute, and it's going to continue to add that moisture and that texture that we're looking for. The next step after this is carving. All right, now's our favorite time, carving the turkey. Now, you might be tempted just to go at it, but there's a couple things you can do here to make sure that we get the most meat off of the bone that we can. And we're going to show you a little bit of that process here. So what I'm going to do, obviously step one is have a really good sharp knife. And this is something that's going to make your job a lot easier. If you try to do this with a dull knife, I promise you might not have a good time. So get yourself a nice sharp knife. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove the wings. So we're going to basically go ahead and pull these outwards. And using my knife, I'm just going to cut through that joint there. Working your way around the bone. Go ahead and remove that piece there. Turn it around, we're gonna do the same thing on this side. It's almost to the point where you can kind of just pull it away. The next part I'm gonna do is I wanna do the same thing to the legs, which I'm gonna start here at the top and I'm gonna run my knife just down this little skin part on both sides. I'm gonna just go ahead and pull those down. And then same thing here, I wanna use my knife and find the joint and work my way through. Again, you can see there that it pulls apart. And you notice you're hearing the crunchiness of that skin, which is what we're looking for, right? Again, we'll do that to the other side here as well. Now, this is the difference between light and dark meat, right? So you'll notice here that this is where all of your dark meat comes from. It's a preference. Some people like the light meat more, some people like the dark. I believe that personally there's a little more flavor in the dark meat, and that's usually good for all of your maybe leftovers the next day. You want to make an open face turkey sandwich or something like that, it makes great for that. Make sure you get all of those pieces out of there. Be careful, it will be hot. Now the next part will be to actually try to remove the breast off of the bone. Again, using a sharp knife, you're gonna find yourself right here on top. There's actually the top of that, the breastbone. I wanna use my knife on one side of that and just gently start running my knife tip down through there. And I'm gonna use the knife along the side of that bone as it moves through, just being careful to not push too hard. Again, I'm just gonna use the bone as my guide here, running that knife blade down through until I'm able to actually remove that whole breast piece from the rib cage. Now, the part here that makes it easy is we're gonna go ahead and just slice this. So we wanna cut across the grain. You'll notice that with turkey and other types of proteins, there's always a grain. You hear that talking about is where the actual structure of those proteins are going, and you want to cut across that, perpendicular to that. That's actually what helps you to have more tender pieces of meat. So I'm going to start here, my grains are running this way, and I'm actually going to carve the opposite direction of that. Again, using a nice sharp knife, however thick pieces you want. I like them a little thicker. And then there you go. You basically have a couple nice pieces of turkey breast. And if you like some of that dark meat as we talked about, you can put some of that on there as well. All right, so there you have it. There is the process for brining and cooking a turkey. As you can see, it doesn't have to be challenging. It's something that can be fun. If you take your time and walk through the processes, it's pretty easy. Again, if you want to see the recipe that we use for our turkey and our poultry, look for the recipe in the description of this video. And I hope that you have a very happy holidays from us and Thanksgiving. We are very excited to enjoy and share this video with you, and I'm gonna go eat some turkey now.